Hi, folks. Andrew here. Top Fitness Strategies. I am the face who runs the place. Got something great for you today. I know I always say that about all my interviews. This one is different. This one is special. And I'll tell you why as we get into it, because I'm a little on the giddy side right here. And you know what? I'm just going to bring her on and so I won't screw everything up later. So my guest today, Gwendolyn Bounds. Gwendolyn is an award-winning journalist and author whose career spans media brands, including the Wall Street Journal, ABC News, Consumer Reports, CNBC, and more. She is currently vice president of content and media partnership at SmartNews. Her most recent book, Not Too Late: The Power of Pushing Limits at Any Age, is an inspiring account about Bounds' midlife transformation into a competitive athlete in the sport of obstacle course racing. Bounds is a graduate of UNC-Chapel Hill and now lives in New York's Hudson Valley. You can connect with her at gwendolynbounds.com. Now you can also add that you're a guest on Top Fitness Strategies. Welcome, Gwendolyn.
It's so good to be here, Andrew. And look, you've already used the word giddy and you went blah, 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 right? Like it doesn't get any better than that. It's all like we're already in a good place. I'm loving it.
That's right. Absolutely. Now, if you've ever watched any of my interviews, my audience is used to me messing up and doing stuff like that. All right. So not a problem there. I'm probably going to be the most unprofessional, professional, quote unquote, person that you've ever been with. You're on the high end side of it. I'm on the low end side of it. But we meet in the middle and everybody has a good time with it. Sound good?
It. I'm all ready to go. Like this is going to be fun.
All right. My first question to you, and I also have a pen sometimes I can do like this. My first question to you is I've watched several interviews you've had. Some people call you Wendy, some people call you Gwendolyn. What do you like to be called?
My byline's under Gwendolyn, but since you're my friend and we're going to be friends, call me Wendy. The only thing nobody calls me except for my mother when she's angry is Gwen. So I know if you call me Gwen, yeah, we're going off the rails.
Okay. All right. Now, I just went through a bunch of your accolades, fantastic and everything else. Obviously, I want to talk about the book, Not Too Late: The Power of Pushing Limits at Any Age, your obstacle racing stuff. But before we get into that, this is not your first book. You've written other books in the past. Is that correct?
Yes. This is I co-wrote one book when I was very young, and then I wrote a book. The book most people probably know me for is a book called Little Chapel on the River, which I wrote after the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001. It's about a Irish pub and country store in the Hudson River Valley. And it's really a love story about a place and all of the people in the town who came there to help save it, myself included. So that was really my first solo book, and then Not Too Late is my second.
Okay, so you did basically answer one of my questions. My question was going to be: are these books athletic based or sports based or anything? The first one is not. Well, how about the second one?
The second one very much is, but you're asking in a roundabout way the right question, because when I wrote the first book, I wasn't even remotely an athlete, right? If you had told me back when I wrote my first book, Little Chapel on the River, in my 30s, that I would be writing a book about being a late in life competitive athlete, I would have told you, right, like you'd had one too many beers at the pub, because that was nowhere in the descriptors athlete, or especially competitive athlete, of anything anybody used to describe me. I was a scrawny kid growing up, and, last pick for sports teams, warmed to the bench, always loved sports and wanted something I thought it could bring me. But it really wasn't until I was approaching the 50-year mark that my story turned. And that's the story I tell in the book, Not Too Late.
Okay. All right. Well, what you just described was me. I was a scrawny little kid, but I played baseball and I ran cross country. I mean, not the two glamour sports, if you will, but like you, being picked last for the team. If I were to play in a pickup basketball team, I wouldn't be picked last. I would be the guy that one team says you can have him. That's how bad I was with basketball.
Yeah.
I think I'm the only kid who grew up in Indiana that really can't play basketball. I think that was it. So
that's funny.
Okay. So
all right. So we have common ground. We have common ground.
Absolutely. But you weren't an athlete. I was a semi-athlete. We were both scrawny and both horrible at basketball. We'll say that. Okay. So then obviously we're going to skip from younger age to the let's just say more adult Gwendolyn. Okay.
Yeah,
No, in
that's me
between.
now for sure.
So how did you go from not doing anything to all of a sudden being, and I'm going to say this, a world-class top athlete in your sport?
Well, it begins at
I
starts at a cocktail party, a dinner
okay.
party, and I overheard this older man say to a young girl, "Little girl, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And she just started rattling off all these amazing things, veterinary and computer programmer, artist, etc. It went on and on and on, and his eyes kind of glazed over. But as I listened to her, it really struck me that in midlife, nobody asks you that anymore. What do you want to be?
Mm-hmm.
And you
Mm-hmm.
actually stop asking yourself. And to that degree, I went home that night and I was really unsettled by it. Woke up the next morning. This is in the book. Pick up my computer and don't know why I Googled this, but Googled what are the hardest things you can do. And the algorithm spit back, what are the hardest physical things you can do? And that dropped me
Oh,
into something called Spartan racing. Spartan
okay.
racing is a form of obstacle course racing, which combines a sport that you're familiar with, which is cross country running, with
Mm-hmm.
completing these obstacles that are like military style obstacles. You scale 6 or 8 foot walls, you climb a 17-foot rope, you carry heavy sandbags up and down mountains. So it was like, oh, this is nothing I will ever be able to do. But I signed up for a free Spartan workout of the day just to
Okay.
see. And
Mm-hmm.
that is how the story begins. It is a long road, almost 8 years from that point to where I stand now. And as you noted, I don't know if I would describe, I don't know what you call me. I don't know if I would call myself a world class athlete, but I just finished a 3 series national race for Spartan. And I'm now number one in my age group for this year. So that is a big jump from that
Well,
dinner
yeah.
party.
Absolutely. So, okay, let's back up a little bit because you are also a TV reporter doing different things on television. And all of a sudden you go to this party and you hear the guy ask a little girl what she wants to be when you grow up, and you start Googling stuff and you find this Spartan race. Now, do you think, this is hypothetical, of course, if something other than physical hardness in life, the difficult things in life, do you think you would have pursued that, or why do you think the Spartan stuff came up right away, and why ca- what caught your eye with that?
I love this question because I haven't been asked it before. So I think I know I think that I don't think I would have, Andrew, because for two reasons. One, there are other hard things I had tried in the past that hadn't really just stuck, right? That I
Hmm.
didn't
Hmm.
keep pursuing. I think deep down, I always craved this sense of being strong. And if you grow up and you don't feel strong, right? And you're watching your friends. I came of age right before Title IX was passed in this country, which gave
Okay.
women the equal footing in sports. And the most popular girls, the ones who are sort of again, like the friendliest and kind of seemed like they had the best leadership skills at my school, they all played competitive sports. So
Hmm.
deep down, I wanted probably to change that part of the narrative of my own story. And so I think that is why once I got started on this path, I stuck with it. Because when I finished my first race in 2018, my first Spartan race at New York City Field, it was actually held in a baseball stadium, not outside where they traditionally are held.
Okay.
you know, I did not do very well. I fell off that 17-foot rope into a crumpled heap. I nearly quit. And yet, when I actually did cross the finish line, I felt the chemistry in my body change. And the only thing I wanted to do at that point was to figure out how to get better. And I think that's something anybody at any age can really relate to,
Hmm.
because I do think it's important for us to keep seeking firsts, for us to get out of this cycle of doing the same things over and over again. And, we have a finite amount of sand in our hourglass. And so, what is something that we've always craved and wanted to do and be? And have we really tried it just so we can see and get it out of our system? Maybe we stick with it, maybe we don't. but I'm really glad that that's where the Google algorithm landed me that morning.
That's interesting. That's great. Okay, now I have a bunch of questions that I've written previously, and as you're talking, I'm writing more down. Of course, just like any good interviewer, I think should. And some of the things that I talk about on my channel and with my clients and with my friends and things of that sort is the older we get, how are we looking at how our body looks? If that makes any sense, how I'm phrasing this. So through all this, and I'm going to skip around quite a bit. It's not going to make any sense, and that's just the way I do it. So I apologize right away. So when you started saying, okay, the Spartan race thing, you saw this and say, you know what, I'm going to pursue this. I like this thing. Did you see your body start to change right away? I mean, from whatever physique you had to obviously you have to have more of a muscular, and I'm not talking bodybuilder, but you have to have muscles that you hadn't had before. So what was the change that you felt and you saw as at a let's say an older age than what you thought you would? If I'm I don't know
Yep,
if I'm making this any
you
sense or
are.
not.
You are. I'm going to answer it for myself, and then I'm going to just sprinkle on the top a little science to
Sure,
back it
sure.
up. And so, first of all, I just, again, I started doing those workouts of the day, and I didn't know what half the moves are. I had to Google
Hmm.
them and watch them on YouTube and figure it out, and then go out in my backyard before I would drive to work and, just kind of fumble around. But at least that fumbling around was doing something. It made, even if I didn't have a process yet, it made me feel as if I was taking some first baby steps. And slowly, within the first few weeks, I mean, yes, I would feel a little bit sore, but in a good way. I'd
Of
get to
course,
work.
yeah,
I would
yeah.
need I would need a second breakfast. I had people saying you've got to eat more protein. They were totally right because I was hungry all the time. But I would the thing I noticed first, actually, Andrew, were these little tiny baby calluses that were appearing on my hands from weights and sort of hanging and carrying things that I would be like feeling under the conference table while I would be staring at a 83-page, PowerPoint presentation, right? And I was like,
Hmm.
wow, I have little baby calluses. And those just became something that were like a small encouragement for me. And then my calf muscle, like once I went to the doctor and somebody said, oh, you must be a runner, look at your calf muscles. And I was like, who are you talking to? And so there were small advances like that. I had never really thought about my body in any way other than just being, again, sort of that skinny gangly kid. And
Hmm.
so as this little tiny signs of strength appeared, I didn't want to lose them. And though they were little encouragement tools. Now, just to throw that science sprinkle on top of it, I interviewed for my book. I went back and interviewed a lot of really smart people, including some of the country's leading authorities on aging. And one of
Okay.
them, a man named Stephen Alstad, told me that the science and the research has really changed in the last few years, where we used to always think to have meaningful impact on our longevity and our health and our mental and physical health, that we had to start early with exercise. They don't think that anymore. The science shows you can get really profound, important changes that can impact you in such positive ways, even if you're starting in midlife and beyond. So I
Hmm.
say that as encouragement to all of your listeners that, I don't think my story is an anomaly. I think this is an opportunity open to many people.
Interesting. No, I once interviewed a bikini model, and she didn't start working out. I mean, like yourself, she's never touched a weight, never was physically active or anything until she was 50 years old. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, now she's one of the tops in the country. I'm not going to mention any names. That's not important. But you mirror her in your pursuit to find something, because all she wanted to do at the time was just to get a little healthier. And all of a sudden she saw some changes and you know what, I kind of like this. And then she started doing research like yourself and blah blah blah, and now she's up to where she needs to be, or where she's at that level. And the same with you. Something I asked her, and I like to ask you, is once you started seeing transformations, once you started feeling like the calluses, and somebody mentioned your calf muscles and everything else, did other friends of yours or family say, "Hey, what are you doing? You look different," and
Hmm.
or Well, why are you pursuing that? That's never going to work. Why wasting your time with that? Did you have that kind of interaction with folks?
I think certainly the people who loved me and knew me the best in my life were, I think they thought probably this would be like a one and done race kind of thing, that I'd do the
Hmm.
one race at City Field, I'd get my finisher t-shirt and my finisher medal and call it a day, and that itch would be scratched. So I definitely think we were all surprised, myself included, how far down the rabbit hole I started to go to try and
Hmm.
improve in this sport. And, it's not certainly the hardest sport, but it's also not the easiest sport, right?
Hmm.
Climbing, last week, 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, I climbed 4,000 plus feet of elevation in the hot mountains of Utah, and a pretty
Jeez.
grueling race, that was a half marathon distance. And it's hard on your body, like that and so it takes its toll. And I think there was probably like, well, you really couldn't have chosen beach volleyball for your midlife foray into athletics. But I also think eventually, once I was able to explain why I needed and loved this, and that it was the sharp edges of this sport that I loved as much as anything, I liked and I still like how hard it is. Because when I'm out there on the course, I'm not thinking about anything else. Like every little worry or concern or thing that's been nagging me or keeping me up or making me
Hmm.
feel anxious, like it goes away, because you're just thinking one foot in front, like, I got to get through this. And there's something freeing about that to me in a way that I haven't found through any other means. And I also know, let's go back to your last good question, Andrew, which is, I also know that this sport has been changing my body for the better for longevity, right? I go and
Hmm.
get what they call DEXA scans to look at my bone density. I look at my muscle mass, and I'm putting on muscle mass at a time of life when you're typically losing it, putting on lean mass and my bone density. So I know there's very good components to this, and that fuels it as well.
Hmm. Now you mentioned a couple of things, and now getting to the thing that I can talk all day about stuff like this. You said, and you say that you looked into why I needed this, and to me that goes into the mindset of things. I absolutely love talking about mindset of where people are, where they excuse me, where they have been, where they're going to go, where they feel like they should go, or anything of that sort. So and I wrote this here. It says about mindset. What changes have you made? Like for instance, when you first saw this, the Spartan thing, when you Googled it, and I'm sorry if I'm saying Spartan thing, and I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm saying if you see it for the first time, you go, what is the Spartan thing? It's intriguing to me. And all of a sudden, you got a mindset saying, hey, you know what? That's intriguing to me. Maybe I should do this. And you're looking at it, and you're reading up about it a little bit, and you do this workout, like, well, is this something I want to pursue? How did you have to change your mind, or did you just fall in love with it right away when you started doing it? Does that making
When I
sense how I'm
first
phrasing this?
when I first read about it, I thought these people are insane. I mean, I read the first article I read was about documentary filmmaker who was doing a film about, obstacle course racing. He had attempted one himself, and he had failed out of the race because he fell off that rope I was talking about. I just thought, this guy looks
Hmm.
like crazy. But at the end of his article, he wrote something about how it had changed his own kind of DNA, even though he didn't do well in that race, and how he something was triggered inside of him that made him want to feel fit and strong and ready,
Hmm.
and that he didn't want to just be somebody chronicling those people. He wanted to be one of those people. And that really stuck with me, his words. And so, I didn't know, again, like the first race, who knows? I could have again finished that first race and been like, that is it. I am never doing this again. Like, this was hard and brutal, and glad I did it, but done. But I didn't feel that. I felt they have this saying at Spartan Race that their marketing line is, you'll know at the finish line. And I was like, what does that mean? And yet when I crossed that finish line, I knew
Wow.
exactly. Like, I just knew I knew that this was something I was going to do again and again. But mostly I just wanted to figure out how to get better. And so the first mindset shift was going from these people are crazy to let me at least be open to this because I'm obviously curious, right? I'm curious enough that I'm clicking and reading and spending my morning, my weekend morning with my coffee getting cold next to me.
Mm-hmm.
There's something there. So instead of thinking, oh, I'm not an athlete, I'm not this, I'm not that, I could never, like all these negative mindsets we throw ourselves into,
Right, right, right.
that was my first shift, Andrew. Like, I know you know how important that is. And there were many other mindset shifts along the way, because as you know, the journey to get better at something is not linear, right? You're going to have huge rises where it feels great and you're getting better, better, better. And then something's going to happen and you're going to dip and it's going to feel
Mm-hmm.
terrible. And you might think, oh, see, I knew it. I knew I wasn't an athlete. I knew I shouldn't have done this. Why am I here? And then you're going to get on a plateau where you're working and you're working and you're working and you're not dipping, but you're also not rising, and having the patience to stay on that. Like, these are all, you and I could have a 3-hour conversation, which we won't now, obviously, but about mindset
Oh,
of pursuing,
absolutely.
yeah, of pursuing mastery, because it requires a lot of patience to weather a lot of different um, points that are not what you thought or hoped it would be when you started.
And so, all right, so that's how it was when you started, and they say when you'll know when you cross the finish line. Was that the phrase you said?
You'll know at the finish line.
You'll know at the finish. That is fantastic. I've never heard that before. I absolutely love that. So you said when you crossed the finish line, you understood what that meant. Okay, so that helped you keep going to the next race and the next race and so on and so forth. So once you started doing more and more races, did you have a shift at one point and say, you know what? I'm doing better and better at this at these. If I change my training a little bit here or do this, maybe I could be one of the top contenders in this. Was there a shift with that, or just a natural progression for you?
There was a shift, but it wasn't as abrupt to I could be one of the national contenders. Like, I never thought that. I mean, I still, even though, I am among at some point some of the best racers of my age group in Spartan by some
Mm-hmm.
measures right now. That is not something that ever really entered my mind in those first years. What really happened was I had a big failure. I went to a race in New Jersey. It was cold weather. I didn't know anything about proper gear. I had no idea about, thermoregulation. And there's an obstacle in Spartan racing called the dunk wall, where you completely submerge yourself in water, fully
Mm-hmm.
clothed, all your gear, everything. And, that happened to me, I think around between mile 5 and 6, I went through that dunk wall. And again, I was wearing like cotton, and I had my hydration vest on. I had long sleeves. I had no knowledge that, like, you should carry a small windbreaker and a plastic baggie that doesn't get wet. So when you come out of the water in conditions like this, you can put that on. You should wear potentially neoprene or fabrics that shed water. Like, I just had no idea. And so by the
Mm-hmm.
time I got to mile 8, I was shaking so hard. My skin was purple. My teeth were chattering. My legs had seized up, and I finally quit. And, they took me to a medical tent in an ATV. I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
even remember the phone number of the person who was with me at like, it was just crazy. But that, instead of, it could have been the moment where I was like, yep, I'm done. But
Right.
instead, it was a moment where I was like, I got to find better coach. I got to find coaches who are going to get me to the next level. And that's when I signed up for 2 coaches who've been my coaches ever since, who have gotten me as far as I have, because the next morning, the next day, I set about finding them.
Okay.
And that was a turning point mentally.
Okay. So up until then, and if you don't mention any names, none of my business. But were you self-coached up until then?
No, well,
Okay.
yes and no. I was self-coached in the beginning for about a year or so. And then I figured I needed to get my hands on some obstacles. So I found a local gym that specialized in helping people with obstacle course racing.
Okay.
I did
Okay.
that
I
for a
got it.
while in group classes. Uh, and it was good. I mean, it got me further. But again, like that turning point I just needed more information, and I wanted to personalize what I was doing, and I had failed even though I'd been taking these classes were great, but I didn't quit those classes. I just augmented. So I brought these new coaches in and I took it very seriously. And I was doing this. It's not like, I mean, I still had a huge full-time job and, obligations and,
Hmm.
marriage and like all the chores, all the things we all have. And so, again, it wasn't like I was leaving any of that behind, but I knew I needed something else to take me to the next level and I needed to stick with it. And that was probably, that was 2019 and I'm still with the same coaches.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Now, top fitness strategies. We're all about the fitness over 50. Has to look better, feel better, gain some confidence. That's what I preach all the time. So somebody who just wants to get off the couch and start doing something. Obviously, you took that to the extreme. All right. So obviously. Um, so I guess my question is, and I know this because I heard you on other interviews, but you haven't mentioned today. So if you don't want to, don't. At what age did you start pursuing this? And if you
Oh,
don't want to
that's
mention an
easy.
age,
Yeah,
don't
no, no,
mention it.
no. I'm happy to. I'm about to turn 53 now, and
Okay.
I started this at that dinner party. I think I was just about to turn 45 if I'm doing the math right in my head.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
that's been the length of time. And it's interesting to hear you say you took it to the extreme because now that I'm in the world of athletics to some degree, I know what I've done is not extreme, right? There are ultra runners who are running 100+ mile races, people doing
Oh, yeah.
marathons on every continent. And like my extreme is maybe it's more ambitious and advanced than I ever thought I could do. It's my impossible with a little I. But like,
Mhm.
let's be very clear. There are people doing the impossible with a capital I out there. And I think sometimes, and I'm bringing this up for a reason because you were talking about mindset.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes we look at those people doing the impossible I's with the capital I, and we're like, well, I could never do that. So like, I'm just not going to bother. But I think finding that impossible with a little I in your own life can make such a difference. I mean, it has for me. And so I just don't want people to be discouraged because they say, well, look at these people doing these extreme things and I could never do that. So if I look at those people and I'm like, well, that's extreme. What I'm doing is not extreme. Somebody might look at what I'm doing and say, well, I could never do a Spartan race, but that doesn't mean you can't move more, right? It doesn't mean
Mhm.
you can't change your habits. And so I just want to say that because I want to unblock people from that comparison and to encourage them to seek what will be their impossible with a little I. There's a guy named
Mhm.
Stephen Kotler who talks a lot about the concept of flow, and he writes about that. So anyway, just wanted to bring that up, Andrew.
Well, and you've hit on a lot of things here, and like I said, I mentioned the bikini pro I talked about before, and now you at a later age in life you started pursuing something, and not with the intent. And if I'm speaking out of line, stop me here. Not with the intent of being, you know, highly competitive in your particular field of endeavor. Yours happened to be Spartan racing, hers was bikini modeling. And you also said that, hey, if I can encourage somebody to just start moving and get off the couch and everything else. And I said the couch now, you didn't. I said that, which is what I'm all about. I said, you know what? A lot of folks that I talk to have been athletes in the past. They were high school, college athletes, and then life happened and they didn't do anything. And now they get back into it. They think if they lift the weight, they're boom, instantly going to get back to where they were. You have to start somewhere and gradually build up a little bit. And and I'm talking, I completely forgot what I was going to ask you about this. So
That's all
what
right.
what kind of person would you think, and this is going to be a softball question, can anybody do what you've done? Let me ask it that way. Excuse me. Can anybody do what you've done?
I think anybody who fell in love with it the way I did could make real strides in this sport. I mean, I see people out there, all ages, all body types. You don't have to race competitively. They have something called
Mhm.
open heats where you can race as teams and have fun and go out together. And if you need to skip an obstacle, you can do that. So again, I think anybody who likes it and wants to do it could give it a go. But
Hmm.
and I make this case in my book. This isn't a book about obstacle course racing. This is a book about finding something that drives you, that gives you, that launches and ignites your own intrinsic motivation to wake up a little earlier and pursue it, to turn off Netflix at night so you can get a better night's sleep, so you can get up and pursue it in the morning. Something that, you're thinking about when you go to sleep at night. And that's not going to be obstacle course racing for everyone, but I bet everybody
Hmm.
has something like that that they can delve into. And I hope that no matter what it is, even if it is something that's very cerebral, that people will also include movement as a regular part of supporting that cerebral act, because it's so important to keep our brains sharp, and it's so important to make us be able to stay fit for life and just
Hmm.
engage in whatever activities we like for as long as we can. So I do think that, there is something for everybody. There is a moment and a way to answer that little girl's question of, what do you want to be before it's too late? Like, I think everybody's probably got something inside them that, if they ignite it, they can pursue it.
Oh, absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head. I'm a of things that I talk about. I'm a firm believer that the human body is not meant to be stationary all the time. The human body is meant to run, walk, push, pull, lift, bend, stretch, whatever. It's not meant to sit around. Whether that be, like you said, pursue what you pursued, or something completely opposite. You, I'm a firm believer. Everybody should get out there and pursue something, to do something with their body. And just like you said, the book is not about Spartan racing. It's more of a motivational thing for somebody who says, you know what, she's right. I need to, or I should pursue something that I've always wanted to, whether I'm, 18 or 58 years old. Let me pursue something. And so I appreciate how you said that. That's the book is not about just the racing. It's about life in general. At an older age, pursue something different. So again, a transition here is non-existent in my life. All right. So when
That's all
in your
right.
book is your book is called Not Too Late: The Power of Pushing Limits at Any Age. What do you mean by the term pushing limits?
It was interesting when I was doing research for the book. I was reading different um, philosophers' work and all sorts of, as I said before, people smarter than I am. I was reading a lot of different texts. One thing I heard from, I think, and I want to make sure I get the name right, but it's William James, who is one of the founding fathers of psychology, is that, you know, most of us are often living under the surface of our potential. And,
Okay.
I'm not, those aren't his direct words, but it was something to that effect. And that really stuck with me, right? This notion of, we all have more inside of us than we think we can. There's a athlete, maybe some of your audience knows, and you might know, named David Goggins, who's pretty famous.
Oh,
And
absolutely. Yes. Yes.
he wrote
Yes.
a great book, I think called Can't Hurt Me. And he talks about something called the 40% rule, which is, when you think you're done and you're fully baked and you have no more left to give, that you are probably only 40% of the way through what your capacities are. And that ties back to this notion of having these reserves inside of all of us. So when I talk about pushing limits, I'm talking about that. I'm thinking about how can we reach deeper, because I think once you know you've I know this feeling. So this is the feeling I want other people to have. When you're at the point where you think you can't go on and where you want to quit and you don't, what that gives you for all the other parts of your life after that moment, there, you cannot put a price tag on that. And so that is the powerful thing I want to impress upon anyone. This is not about pushing limits to get hurt. This is not
Hmm.
about pushing limits to just say, ooh, I did this big, amazing, cool thing, bragging rights, Instagram photos, all of that. This is about, this is solitary. This is solitary knowledge about yourself and what you can dig, what then the next time you can rely on yourself. Like, you'll have a little more faith in yourself of what you can do. And it translates for me from the race course to work to community service to everything. And that's what I mean by that, Andrew.
Wow. Yeah, fantastic. Gwendolyn, we could, again, we could talk for hours and hours and hours about this. I only asked for a little bit of your time, and I appreciate it. And the time's about up. I know that. You can, so tell people where they can find the book and how to get in contact with you if they needed to.
Sure. The book is available online and in bookstores, almost any major retailer. You can find links to buy directly on my own website, gwendolynbounds.com, including a link to a local bookstore in my town where you can get a signed copy if you want. And I should mention that for anybody buying the book now from any retailer, for while the supplies last, I've got a free race to give to anyone, free code for a free race, a Spartan race, to try it to anybody who wants to. So if you're somebody who's interested in this, and again, you don't have to race in a competitive heat. Like I said, you can race in an open heat, and you do end up reading the book and you're like, ooh, I'd maybe like to try that. Or I know somebody who would like to try that. The details are on my website, which is gwendolynbounds.com.
Right, and I'll link to everything here. Again, my guest is Gwendolyn Bounds, and she wrote the book Not Too Late: The Power of Pushing Limits at Any Age. gwendolynbounds.com. So, Gwendolyn, once again, thank you for being here, for being my guest and everything else. My gosh, there's so many more questions I have here that we could go on and on and on. And again, I'm not taking up too much of your time, but here's something: is there a quick little story or something, a memorable race or something that sticks out in your mind that you're like, yeah, that's funny, I want to end with this one today? Is there anything like that sticks out that you can say?
Well, the funny one would be that the fact that every time I dive into muddy water in those dunk walls, I hear from my mother, like, are you going to get an ear infection? So there's that. I don't know how motivating that is to everybody, but I'll tell you very quickly one last little story. And I think there's something important in here. I flew to Abu Dhabi in the Middle East for the World Championship in 2021. I was very hopeful that I might have a chance at getting on the podium for my age group. About midway through, I was on an obstacle, reached up and grabbed these chains, and I was like on my feet up on the obstacle. And I guess somebody with like gooey suntan lotion, it's very hot in the desert in Abu Dhabi, obviously, had been on there. And the next thing I knew, I was on the ground and I thought I had fractured my coccyx bone, or at least really bruised it. And I stood up, and in that moment, all my goals and hopes for a podium finish were like just gone, because I could walk, but I couldn't run anymore. And I had shoved 2 gooey Tylenol in my pocket, and I took those and I thought about David Goggins' 40% rule. And I figured, well, even if I didn't have 40%, if I was more than 40% the way through, at least was there something I had left? And I had to reset my goal, which was to cross the finish line. This was a 13.1 mile race, a half marathon race, 0.2 mile race. Cross the finish line and don't be last. And I managed to do that, just managed to do that. And I think, this was a moment where I could have, again, quit. I was 7,000 miles from home, gotten in that ATV, said, well, I don't have a shot at the podium. What's the point? But we all are going to have things that derail us. And so can you reset your goals in the moment? Because I think if you can reset your goals in the moment and you still can complete some part of it, then again, you walk away with a lesson and something deeper. And I'm really glad I was able to do that at that point. I don't know if I would have been able to a year or two earlier, but I leave everybody with that, right? Life throws a lot of obstacles in our way. How do you pivot and reset and get around them or over them?
That's what I was just going to say. I mean, that's such a great story, because anybody can relate to that, because life happens.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's life. Whether it's in a race like you were doing or just living your life, you get in a car accident, God forbid you don't get hurt. All of a sudden, boom, you're uprooted. And the plans you had the rest of that day, the month, the year, they're shot. You got to refocus and do something else. So what you just said was fantastic. That is such a life lesson right there. Just get up and keep going. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Again, Gwendolyn Bounds, Not Too Late: The Power of Pushing Limits at Any Age, has been my guest today. You can find more information about the book, or go to any bookstore and get the book, or go to gwendolynbounds.com. I'm linking everything in the show notes, and that's not a problem there. Gwendolyn, thank you again for being a guest on Top Fitness Strategies. You're welcome back anytime. again, I'm sure this is totally different than anything you've ever done before. I hope it wasn't too goofy on my end, but hey, that's just the way it goes with my shows. I hope you hope you appreciate it. So
I had a
thanks
great
again.
time, Andrew, and you get points. You never called me Gwen once. You win.
Fantastic.
All right.
Almost, but I didn't. All right, folks, I'll stop it here. My name is Andrew. This is Top Fitness Strategies. I am the face who runs the place. Go to GwendolynBounds.com. Get the book. You'll love it. All right. So until next time, this is Andrew and Gwendolyn. Ciao.